January 2010. The sun was just starting to rise over the busy Los Angeles International Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world. Security lines were long, agents were scanning bags, and travelers were rushing to catch their flights. But amid the chaos, a man walked calmly through the terminal, carrying nothing but a small, unassuming backpack. To the casual observer, he was just another traveler, maybe a businessman or a tourist. But to those who knew the underground world, he was something else entirely. They called him the Ghost. The man who could smuggle anything for anyone, anywhere, anytime. Guns, drugs, rare artifacts, stolen art, even people. Nothing was off limits. Borders, customs, and law enforcement agencies across the globe had tried to catch him, but he always slipped through their fingers like smoke. How does one man manage to outsmart the most secure borders, customs, and law enforcement agencies, time and time again? What kind of mind does it take to build a smuggling empire that spans continents, all while staying invisible to the very people hunting him? This is the story of that man. Not just a criminal, but a master of deception, a strategist, and a survivor. A man who turned smuggling into an art form. The world of smuggling is often painted in broad strokes, shadowy figures in dark alleys, frantic exchanges in back rooms, and high-speed chases through city streets. But the reality is far more complex. It's a world where technology meets old-school cunning, where psychology is as important as brute force, and where every move is calculated with precision. Our man, the Ghost, understood this better than anyone. While governments invested billions in scanners, sensors, and surveillance, he relied on something far more powerful: human nature. He knew how to read people, how to exploit their assumptions, and how to create distractions that made the impossible look routine. While the world focused on high-tech security, he mastered the art of blending in, becoming invisible in plain sight. But the Ghost didn't start out as a criminal mastermind. Like many legends, his story began humbly, in a small town in the Midwest. Born to a working-class family, he grew up in a world where opportunity was scarce, and the American dream felt just out of reach. From a young age, he showed a knack for problem-solving and a rebellious streak that often got him into trouble. Whether it was sneaking into restricted areas at school or outsmarting neighborhood kids in makeshift games of strategy, he was always thinking 2 steps ahead. His early years were marked by a restless energy and a hunger for something more. The small town couldn't contain him, and by the time he was in his late teens, he was already dabbling in small-time hustles, moving goods across state lines, finding loopholes in the system, and building a network of contacts. The turning point came when he landed a job working for a local courier company. It was a modest gig, but it gave him access to the logistics world: trucks, warehouses, shipping routes. He learned how packages moved, how customs worked, and where the weak points were. One day, a client approached him with a risky request to move a package that couldn't be declared or inspected. It was a test, and he passed with flying colors. Word spread quickly, and soon he was handling more and more special shipments. What started as a side hustle soon became a full-time operation. He built a reputation for reliability and discretion, and his client list grew to include people from all walks of life, from desperate immigrants seeking a better life to wealthy collectors wanting rare items smuggled past customs. But what truly set the Ghost apart was his ability to innovate. While most smugglers relied on brute force or simple concealment, he combined technology, psychology, and old-school street smarts to stay ahead. He used encrypted communications, fake identities, and complex routes that zigzagged across borders. He studied customs officers' routines, exploited blind spots in security cameras, and even used decoys to throw off surveillance. One of his most famous tricks involved using everyday items as hiding spots, hollowed-out books, modified electronics, even custom-made clothing with secret compartments. To the untrained eye, these were just ordinary objects, but to the ghost, they were tools of the trade. Despite his success, the life of a smuggler is never without risk. Every job carried the possibility of arrest, betrayal, or worse. But the ghost thrived on the edge, always calculating the odds and preparing for the worst. His story is not just about crime, it's about survival, ingenuity, and the blurred lines between right and wrong. In a world where laws are often unevenly enforced, and where desperation drives people to extremes, he became a symbol of both rebellion and resilience. So, how did the ghost build his empire? How did he manage to stay free while the world's most powerful agencies hunted him? And what does his story tell us about the nature of freedom, control, and the human spirit? That's what we're about to find out. Before the ghost became a name whispered in the shadows of international smuggling rings, he was just another kid growing up in a small town in the American Midwest. A place where the streets were quiet, the neighbors knew each other's business. And the biggest excitement was the Friday night high school football game. His real name? That's a secret he guarded fiercely. But those who knew him back then remember a kid with a restless spirit and a sharp mind. He wasn't the star athlete or the class president. Instead, he was the kid who always had a plan. Whether it was how to sneak into a movie without a ticket or how to hustle a few extra bucks selling candy at school. Growing up in a working-class family, money was tight. His parents worked long hours, his dad at a factory, his mom juggling 2 jobs. They wanted the best for their son, but opportunities were limited. The American dream felt like a distant promise, one that seemed to slip further away with each passing year. But this kid wasn't about to wait for opportunity to knock. He created his own. From an early age, he learned the value of hustle. He ran errands for neighbors, fixed bikes, and even started a small lawn mowing business. But it wasn't enough. He wanted more freedom, more control, more excitement. School wasn't his favorite place. He found the rules stifling and the lessons boring. But he excelled in one subject, strategy. Whether it was chess club or neighborhood games, he had a knack for thinking several moves ahead. This skill would later become his greatest asset. By the time he was a teenager, he was already testing the limits. He learned how to pick locks, how to forge signatures, and how to talk his way out of trouble. Not because he wanted to be a criminal, but because he was curious about how systems worked and how to bend them without breaking. His first real taste of smuggling came almost by accident. A family friend needed help moving some goods across state lines. Nothing illegal, just items that were too bulky or expensive to ship through regular channels. The teenager saw an opportunity. He offered to help, and in return, he got a cut of the profits. That small job opened a door. He realized there was a whole world out there where rules were flexible, and the right connections could make anything possible. He started taking on more jobs, moving electronics, rare collectibles, even exotic pets. Each successful delivery built his reputation and expanded his network. But it wasn't just about moving goods, it was about understanding people. He learned how to read customs officers, how to spot the signs of suspicion, and how to stay calm under pressure. He studied the routines of Border Patrol agents, memorized security camera placements, and figured out the best times to move shipments. His approach was methodical. He wasn't reckless. Every job was planned down to the minute, every risk calculated. He combined street smarts with a growing knowledge of technology, using encrypted phones, burner devices, and fake IDs to stay one step ahead. By his early 20s, He had outgrown the small-town hustle. He moved to a bigger city, somewhere with more opportunity and more anonymity. Los Angeles, New York, Miami, places where the underground economy thrived, and borders were just lines on a map. Here, he met people who would change his life: experienced smugglers, hackers, corrupt officials, and desperate clients. He learned new tricks, from hiding contraband in shipping containers to using drones for surveillance. He built a network that stretched across states and countries. One of his earliest big breaks came when a wealthy art collector approached him with a challenge to smuggle a priceless painting out of Europe and into the US. The painting was heavily guarded, insured for millions, and nearly impossible to move without detection. Most smugglers would have said no, but not him. He saw it as a puzzle, a game to be won. Using a combination of forged documents, hidden compartments in shipping crates, and a carefully timed distraction at customs, he pulled off the job flawlessly. Word spread fast. Suddenly, he wasn't just a small-time smuggler. He was the guy who could get anything anywhere. From that moment on, his phone never stopped ringing. But with success came new dangers. The bigger the jobs, the higher the stakes. Law enforcement agencies started paying attention. Customs officials shared intelligence. Rivals tried to muscle in on his territory. Yet, he adapted. He diversified his methods, used multiple aliases, and never stayed in one place too long. He became a ghost in the system, impossible to pin down, impossible to predict. His story is a reminder that sometimes, the greatest power lies not in brute force or technology, but in understanding the human element. In a world obsessed with surveillance and control, the ghost thrived by mastering the art of invisibility, not by hiding, but by blending in. By the time the ghost hit his mid-20s, he was no longer just a small-town hustler or a local courier with a few tricks up his sleeve. He had transformed into a smuggling prodigy, a man whose reputation stretched far beyond the borders of any single state or country. But this rise wasn't overnight. It was a calculated climb, built on a foundation of trust, innovation, and a deep understanding of the underground economy. His first major smuggling job that truly put him on the map came in the form of a high-stakes challenge. A client, desperate and well-connected, needed a shipment of rare electronics moved from Miami to New York without attracting any attention. These weren't just any gadgets, they were prototypes, worth millions, and highly sought after by competitors and law enforcement alike. Most smugglers would have balked at the risk. But the ghost saw opportunity. He meticulously planned every detail: the timing of shipments, the routes, the disguises. Instead of sending the goods in one large shipment, he broke them down into smaller packages, each disguised as everyday items: a box of children's toys here, a shipment of kitchenware there. He coordinated with trusted contacts at warehouses and shipping yards, ensuring the packages were never in one place for too long. He even used decoy shipments to throw off customs officials who were left chasing shadows while the real goods slipped through. The job was a success. The client was thrilled, and word of the ghost's skill spread quickly through the underground networks. What set him apart wasn't just his ability to move goods. It was how he did it. While many smugglers relied on brute force or sheer luck, the ghost combined technology, psychology, and old-school street smarts in a way that was almost surgical. He was an early adopter of encrypted communication tools, long before they became mainstream. He used burner phones, coded messages, and even developed his own system of signals and codes to communicate with his network. This made it nearly impossible for law enforcement to intercept or decode his plans. But technology was only part of the equation. He understood people, their fears, their routines, their blind spots, He studied customs officers' behavior, noting when they were most alert and when they were likely to be distracted. He exploited human error and complacency, turning it into his greatest advantage. As his operations grew, so did his network. He wasn't working alone anymore. He recruited specialists, hackers who could disable security systems, insiders who worked at ports and airports, drivers who knew every back road and shortcut. Together, they built a smuggling empire that spanned the Americas and beyond. From the bustling ports of Los Angeles to the busy airports of Miami. From the border towns of Texas to the shipping yards of New York, the Ghost's influence was everywhere. One of the most audacious parts of his empire was his ability to smuggle not just goods, but people. Desperate immigrants, fleeing violence or poverty, would pay handsomely for a chance at a better life. The Ghost saw this as both a business opportunity and a moral challenge. He developed safe routes, using a combination of forged documents, hidden compartments in vehicles, and trusted guides who knew the terrain. He was careful to avoid unnecessary risks, knowing that a single mistake could cost lives. His reputation for discretion and reliability made him the go-to man for those who needed to cross borders quietly and safely. But this also put him in the crosshairs of law enforcement agencies, who were increasingly focused on human trafficking and border security. Despite the growing pressure, the Ghost remained elusive. He was a master of disguise, often changing his appearance and identity. He used fake passports, multiple aliases, and even altered his voice when communicating. He never stayed in one place for too long, constantly moving between safe houses and cities. His network was decentralized, with trusted lieutenants managing different regions, making it difficult for authorities to track him down. But no empire is without its cracks. Rival smugglers, jealous of his success, tried to muscle in on his territory. Corrupt officials demanded bigger payoffs, and the constant threat of betrayal loomed over every deal. The Ghost learned to navigate these dangers with the same precision he used in his smuggling operations. He built loyalty through respect and fair dealings, but he was also ruthless when necessary. He also pioneered the use of technology in smuggling encrypted communications, GPS trackers disguised as toys, drones for surveillance. His network was a blend of old-school street smarts and cutting-edge tech, but with great power came great risk. The larger his empire grew, the more attention he attracted. Federal agencies like the FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security began pooling resources to track him down. International law enforcement agencies coordinated efforts, sharing intelligence and launching joint operations. Despite the pressure, the Ghost remained elusive. He was a master of disguise, constantly changing his appearance and identity. He used fake passports, multiple aliases, and even altered his voice when communicating. He never stayed in one place for too long, moving between safe houses and cities. However, the life of a smuggler is never without close calls. There were moments when the walls seemed to close in, raids on warehouses, intercepted shipments, informants turning against him, but thanks to a tip-off from a trusted insider, the Ghost managed to reroute the shipment at the last minute, swapping the real goods with decoys. Trusted allies turned informants, jealous rivals plotted his downfall, and personal relationships became liabilities. One of his closest confidants, a lieutenant who managed operations in Texas, was arrested and flipped, providing authorities with critical information. This betrayal led to a series of raids that crippled parts of the network. Despite these setbacks, the Ghost managed to rebuild. His resilience was legendary. He learned from every mistake, tightened security, and became even more cautious. Relationships were strained, trust was scarce, and the line between friend and foe blurred. The turning point began when federal agencies, frustrated by years of failed attempts, launched a multi-agency task force dedicated solely to bringing him down. The FBI, Homeland Security, and even international partners pooled their resources, sharing intelligence and coordinating operations across borders. They started by targeting his network's weakest links, the lieutenants and middlemen who managed day-to-day operations. Arrests piled up, and with each capture, the pressure mounted. Some of these men flipped, providing authorities with valuable information about routes, contacts, and methods. But the Ghost was no fool. He had contingency plans for everything: safe houses, burner phones, alternate routes. He vanished from the public eye, cutting off most direct communication with his network. His empire became more decentralized, harder to trace. Still, the walls were closing in. One of the most devastating blows came when a trusted lieutenant, the man who had managed operations in Texas for years, was arrested and agreed to cooperate with the authorities. His testimony led to a series of raids that dismantled key parts of the smuggling network. With his empire crumbling, the Ghost faced a choice: fight to the bitter end, or disappear into the shadows forever. He chose the latter. Using a combination of fake identities, forged documents, and a network of safe houses, he slipped away from the reach of law enforcement. Some say he fled the country. Others believe he's living under a new identity somewhere in the U.S., quietly watching the world move on without him. His disappearance only added to the legend. But what about the millions of dollars, the priceless goods, the people he helped smuggle? Much of it vanished without a trace. Some believe he stashed away a fortune, hidden in secret locations, waiting for the right moment to reclaim it. His story raises difficult questions about crime, survival, and morality. Was he a villain, exploiting desperation and greed? But despite all efforts, the smuggling game continues. New players emerge, new routes open, and the cycle repeats. The Ghost's legacy is a reminder that in the shadows of society, where desperation meets opportunity, ingenuity and audacity can change the game, for better or worse. So next time you hear about a daring smuggling operation, or a mysterious fugitive slipping through the cracks, remember the man who smuggled anything for anyone. The man who turned crime into an art, and survival into a legend.